Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club. I worked for Benj many years ago. I was about 12, I think, in 1986, in a loft in Oyster Bay, making some sales for a 43-footer called Blue Yankee. Obviously I've known him for a very long time. I first met him at the 505 Worlds in Cork in 1980, and have known him and watched his racing results ever since. Out here we know him most from winning China Sea races and San Fernando's and stuff like that on Vida and on Caracoa. His career has involved Ullman sales, bank sales and North sales, and most recently I've been in contact with Benj with regards to this new high performance rule and how it will hopefully impact and lead to a bit more international Grand Prix sailing, which seems to have sort of died a bit of a death over the last 10 or 20 years. So Benj, thanks a million for taking the time on your way home to stop in, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here back in Hong Kong. I have a lot of fond memories here racing out in the harbor, and I already screwed up the train from the airport. I got off in Kowloon, and the taxi driver, of course, had no idea where Hong Kong Yacht Club was. So we had a little bit of tour through the harbor tunnel, and but we made it, and it's just great to be here, and I'm flattered by the attendance. Thank you all. And I don't know if everybody knows each other, but maybe we should just go around real quick and say who you are, and just so we all, I mean, we've got a small group. Is that good? Go ahead.
I'm Jochen.
Tom Shepard.
Keith.
Keith Jacobs.
Frank Palm.
Nick. Nick, sorry.
Jamie McWilliam.
Cynthia.
I'm Saki.
Iris.
Gordon.
Peter.
JP.
Olivier.
Steve.
Nigel.
Ollie.
Warwick.
Scotia.
Andy Lamb.
Richard Knight. Mike One.
Niels.
Terrific. I didn't know if everybody knew each other. Probably you all do. But it helps get the names with the faces, and the small group, so feel free to interrupt with questions or comments. Anything goes tonight. And specifically, I'm here to describe what's going on with the high performance rule, and basically as an ambassador from the United States, I'm now affiliated with several organizations there, including the New York Yacht Club, U.S. Sailing, the Sailing Yacht Research Foundation, and some others. But all what we're trying to do is to create an understanding around the world and promote sailing and look 10 years into the future and say, where do we want sailing to be in 10 years from now, and how can we get it there, and how can we get more people sailing and having fun and being safe on the water, and what do we need to be doing now to get our sport where it should be in the future. So we'll go to the next slide. And where we're working with the Sailing Yacht Research Foundation, which is an American foundation, but it's international in breadth. And we're working with all rules. All of our information is public, it's published, and we're expanding the foundation to do more and more research and help with the sport. And we're filling a gap, we think and we hope, and we're open to suggestions as to future projects. We're just now embarking on a project called the Wide Light Boat Project. We've got an advisory council of some of the world's top yacht designers and CFD analysts and tank testers and really major thought leaders in our sport that are helping the foundation move forward. And we're publishing all of our research and making it available, freely available to everyone. And so we reached out to the ORA, which is an American organization, it's the Offshore Racing Association, to the ORC, which everyone knows is the Offshore Racing Congress. We have an olive branch to the IRC and the RORC to take our information and use it in any way, that shape or form that they feel it could help. We're supporting the offshore racing rule, which we have in America and basically nowhere else other than North America. Supporting the ORC and U.S. Sailing and the high performance rule, and at Sailing Yacht Research Foundation, we're quite happy to support IRC to have them make use of it. as well. Basically anyone and everyone who wants to. So HPR came about through the New York Yacht Club originally in 2010. I was named chairman of the Handicap Rules Committee at the New York Yacht Club. And we've had several meetings and have a good committee. And what we looked at in the committee meetings was that there was a real need for fair racing and fun, fast, high-performance, offshore-capable boats, and that a new paradigm was therefore needed to inspire new design and construction, get boats building around the world. The boats had to be safe, fun, and fast. And one of our hallmarks is that the rule must be transparent and fair, published, available to all. So it's a formula rule, which is, and you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, on a website, hprsailing.org, ready to be downloaded by anyone, and it's just an Excel spreadsheet, so you can use it if you want to. And we're trying to create a common protocol that could work for fast racing boats all over the world. Next one, Mike. This pyramid shows the concept of the rules and the world and where we are with HPR at the top of the pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid, we have the local club racing. In America, we have PHRF, which is a performance handicap racing fleet. And so in between, we have all of the existing rules. And what we've been thinking is that there is really no Grand Prix level rule right now, and we tried to fill that gap with HPR at the top. And as many of you know, in the middle area here we have IRC, ORCI, a little bit lower down we have ORC Club. In the US we have ORR. Some of these rules are published and transparent, others are not. And we feel that HPR has got to be completely transparent, published, and that's one of the keys to, if it's going to be successful, it's got to be fair and easily understandable and known. There's no subjective factors, in other words. We'll move on to the next. And then, so the features of HPR, and I'm here to say that we do not want to displace any other rating rule. We feel that we can race within the other rating rules. IRC is popular here, that's great. In Europe, ORC is popular, that's great too. In America, ORR is popular, all that's fine. What we're trying to do with HPR is to provide a platform for a higher level of racing with type form boats that are fast and fun and offshore capable. And you can have a subset of any of these other rules with HPR. You could have standalone HPR regattas if you want to, if you've got enough boats like we did at Key West, we had 9. You could do whatever you want, but at least we have a standardized formula which is available to all and published. So we develop a rating in metric length and then we convert it to a time-on-time handicap. And you'll see a sample of the certificate. To do this has been a long process and pretty difficult. And we've studied a lot of the rating rules going back to the turn of the century, 1900, and the universal rule and many others. So what we've tried to do is to analyze the key factors. We'll go on to the next. And the goals that we have, it's really to try to get more people sailing around the world. Like I said in the beginning, looking forward 10 years, how can we do that? What do we need to do and create more excitement into our sport? And you can all download this. I'll make it available to everyone, so I won't read every single word here. But one of the absolute keys here is this bottom clause, which is the universal measurement system. This is a concept which has been floating around now for about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, but the idea of it is that the boat, your boat, or any boat that you sail on, could have basically a passport. And that passport for the boat would be its measurement. And the measurement is taken once at the beginning of the boat. Of course, you can update it with new sails, or if you change a keel or something, then you have to update it. But basically, you have a one-time measurement of all the parameters of the boat, which would then work in any rule. HPR, ORC, ORC Club, IRC, ORR in America, PHRF, whatever rule you want to race that boat under, it's already measured. And the problem up till now is that the different rules measure the boat differently and they define some of the variables differently. The classic example I always use is a spinnaker pole on a Swan 441. Under IRC, it was a printed different number than it was under ORR. And that's because on one rule they measure it straight along the center line of the boat, and on the other rule it's squared 90 degrees, so the definitions are different. Well, this is now being resolved, and we have all the major entities on board coming together with this UMS, Universal Measurement System. And I believe that within about a year's time, we'll have that in place, and that the boat can then finally be measured once, and you'll be able to be issued a rating certificate for whichever rule you want to race under, or rules. Yeah.
Benj, do you expect that the universal measurement system is going to wind up having a small-ish list of numbers, or are we going to have, or like at the moment, for example, if you take the IRC requirements, the RC requirements, etc., you wind up with the overlap is about 50%.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wind up at the moment with about 1.5 times as long as it currently is. Do you think it'll be shorter than that? Do you think some of the guys will agree that we don't have to measure both overhangs and freeboard?
I think initially you're going to have to measure everything to satisfy all the different rules, and then we'll get this protocol into place, and then we'll start distilling it down, and they'll figure out, oh, we don't need to do that measurement. It'll be like the racing rules of sailing. You'll finally see that this is a redundant measurement that's not needed. When you get to HPR, you'll see how few measurements you actually need for HPR.
Yeah.
And like you say, IRC doesn't need that many, but ORC needs a lot, and ORR needs a lot. So for everybody to have the passport, you've got to measure fully. Now, you may find a measurer who doesn't want to measure the whole boat, and you may say, that expense, I don't need this because I'm never going to race under one of those rules. So then you just fill out part of the UMS. There's nothing to say you have to fill out the entire UMS. You can pick which measurements you want, but at least then they'll be compatible. Okay. How many here are RORC members? So Frank, I think you were saying that the pool side just said that the RORC is now endorsing the Universal Measurement System in their new
I
newsletter.
don't think they said endorsing. But they
Studying.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
With a view of.
That's it. That's a nice bit.
Endorsing would be a big word for Mike Irwin to use.
So these are some of the people who have been involved with creating HPR and bringing it to the point where it is now, and there are several others that are not on that list, but let's get on to the meat of it, so keep moving. What is the HPR type form? And this is a type forming rule. HPR is definitely a type forming rule. And the type form that is being developed by HPR as a basis is fractional rig for upwind sailing. And we've just with version, the way this works is new versions are released and published on the hprsailing.org website. And we've just published version 4E. And we've allowed the fractionality, if you want to call it that, to go up to 92%. So that's the type form now in HPR, that you can be fractional rig upwind, and then masthead asymmetric spinnaker to centerline sprit downwind, and swept-back spreaders for rig stability, and the lightest displacement that can basically be designed to be seaworthy.
Which is what for a 40-footer?
4,000 kilograms. And up to about 4,500 kilograms, you will get a credit if you're heavier. And then this is where it gets a little bit complicated. But basically, can we skip to the next slide and come back to this one? Okay, so here's the HPR formula. So there's only 14 variables, and they all multiply together. So your rating is the sum of all the variables multiplied together. This is going to look a little bit familiar to those of you who may have studied IRM in the past, which was the RORC's attempt at a Grand Prix rule. Nevertheless, length is the basis of all, and length is measured without overhangs. So you only need to measure length once, and it's the total length of the boat, however you want to make your boat. And this goes back to Jamie's comment that we need to simplify things. So there you have it. There's no overhangs. This is for new boats. For existing boats, you have to go back and start looking at overhang credits and whatnot. But this is a new boat formula for fast, offshore, fun, safe boats that really plain racing boats. So, okay, so it's all based on length. So you take whatever length you want, and then all of these other factors are relative to whatever length. So we'll keep using the 40-footer as an example because it's a well-known boat. Jamie has a Care 40, which displaces around 5,000 kilograms, right?
Yeah, when I'm rolling board.
Roughly 5,000 kilos. I have a Carkeek 40 that displaces 4,000 kilos. Okay. Age allowance will apply to Jamie because yours is a 2010 or 11 design, and mine is a 2012 design, so I'm not getting any age allowance yet. Beam, your boat is a little wider,
4.3.
right? So you're going to take a little bit of penalty for that. Freeboard is basically a control for new boats, so we don't get carried away, like the McConaughey 38 with a really low freeboard design. The McConaughey 38 is, as an existing boat, it's just gotten some rating relief, and it's not being penalized for its low freeboard, but a new design would. Draft, obviously, is a very important speed predictor, and we're 10 feet. Do you know what you are?
2.6 meters.
Okay, so we're a little bit deeper, so you'll get a little credit there. VCG, sorry.
With a deeper draft, you get credit.
You get penalty.
Oh, penalty.
The deeper the draft, the more the penalty. So he'll get a credit, and I'll be right at where we think. This is all in type form. So basically, what we did is to say for this 40-footer, this is a boat that we want. This is the type form that we want. And then if you're shallower than that, you'll get a little bit of credit. If you're deeper than that, you're going to get a penalty. And I'll show you how it works when we go back to the other slide. VCG, same thing. Pick a point which is should be the vertical center of gravity of boats and of a modern, fast racing planing boat. If you're deeper than that, you're going to get a penalty.
How is that measured, Ben?
I'll show you how. I have a slide on that. Crew factor, so this is crew weight, and you're allowed a maximum crew weight under HPR, and then if you're lighter than that, you get a little credit. Displacement, obviously, the heavier, the slower.
Can you measure in at the regatta?
Yeah.
The crew weight bit?
You weigh in at the regatta.
Okay, but in other words, if you turn up and you're not on the weight that you had on your cert previous, you'll change it, right?
No, you submit with your entry the crew weight that you want, and then you're obliged to hit that, because you can't be changing your certificate at regatta. So that's the way we have it right now. But you know, it could change if you want to be that flexible. What we're trying to avoid is people getting the weather forecast and then bringing their crew on.
Got it.
Sail area, obviously, more faster. Rig height factor controls the height of the mast. Robust mast controls the spreader sweep. Construction cost is an interesting one. There's a credit for production boats if you hit a price point on production boats. Engine propeller, we assume that the boat will have a lifting propeller, and if you don't, then you get a 0.5% credit. And then movable appendages we're not into yet, so that's a factor. Now, go back one. So here's those are the 14 factors, and with the beam factor, the wider the boat, the higher the percentage above the base boat. Here's the base boat at 1. So if the boat gets wider, it's going to get into a penalty area. And if it gets narrower, it's going to get a credit. This is where the FAR 40s live. The speed is predicted over here, whereby if you're hitting right here with the beam of the base boat, you're going to be right at 1.0 on your speed predictor. And then if you get wider, you start going faster. And if you get narrower, you start going slower on this curve. So what we're saying with HPR is basically we want your new HPR boat to live right in here, in this zone around the base beam. Whereas if you want to really push your beam, then we'll start going to a penalty line, which will be probably double the slope. This is called a performance line, so wider's faster on this, and it's, right now they're all straight lines, but they eventually could be curved if we figured there was a need for that. But let's say that this is the slope of the performance line for beam, and once you get outside of the limit, where we think you ought to be within the limit, then it doubles, and then it quadruples. And the opposite also happens on the credit, except that the credit will stop, you'll stop getting a credit at a certain point. You just won't get any more credit if you're too narrow. So this is a way to drive boats together towards the type form.
So the only reason that you'd have a boat as wide as in the red spot is if, for example, you wanted to win a reaching race.
You could do that, yeah. But you'd have to really think twice about going into the red zone.
Sure, but it's a single number handicap, right?
Yes,
so there's
it
going
is.
to be times when it's going to help to be...
Absolutely.
And then secondly, how do you make these numbers work if it's not a 40-footer? I mean, if the type form is the Carkeek 40 at 1...
Right, so we used a TP52,
Okay.
Mini Maxi 72. We did a 45 just to like bridge the curves.
I see.
We did a 35 and down to a 26.
Okay.
There's no waterline measurement.
Sorry?
No waterline beam measurement.
No waterline beam, just a deck beam. Okay, so this is a VCG getting weighed on, it's actually my keel, and there's a protocol for weighing the keel. There's a protocol from weighing the mast, so it's already in place. And once you have the weights for the keel, the mast, the boat, then you can compute the boat's VCG, which is how we do it. So there is a requirement for HPR boats to weigh the keel according to this protocol.
How does it work that it works with an offset file or without an offset file?
Either way, we prefer without the offset file, because once you get into offset files, then it brings in a whole another order of complexity. So you do not need an offset file to be measured for HPR. But there are reasons why the offset files help. They help establishing freeboards. This is all part of the discussion that's going on around the universal measurement system and trying to rationalize this with the various systems around the world. At least we're throwing out a protocol where this is how one way it can be done. There may be other ways, better ways. We'd love to hear about it. But this is on paper and repeatable now as a procedure. Next. Okay, so some examples of HPR boats. We wanted to reach down as far as 26 feet to the ORC 26, and so that's included. There's a new 35, which is a sort of a price target for getting owners into HPR type of boats, whereby when you get to the 40, they start getting a little bit expensive for a lot of people. The 35 so far has been roughly half the price of the 40. So it's an easy entry point to get a boat like this. And then we go to a couple boats that are well known. That the McConaughey is well known in Australia. Is looking very carefully at picking this rule up as a major introduction in Australia. And Fred Barrett has a 38-footer down there that he's about to launch. And then of course we've got the FAR 400s and the Carkeek 40s. The Carkeek 40 is really the first purpose-built HPR design, and there's 3 of them. The Botin 40 is under construction and is going to Japan, and that's what happened with the Botin and Carkeek office. The 2 split, so there's Botin from Spain and Carkeek from South Africa. So the Botin office is building this at McConaughey, China right now, and I believe the molds will be ongoing for Botins out of McConaughey. The Soto 40 sort of fits. It's the right kind of boat for HPR, but it's not really optimized to the rule. We haven't raced, so I can't tell you how they do yet.
What about the Soto isn't optimal?
Well, it's fiberglass for one thing, and carbon's allowed, so you're better off with carbon. They would get a VCG credit because of their whole construction. Is it enough? I'm not really sure.
They get a price point benefit?
They maybe could. Yeah, if that might be one boat that could hit the price point. There's a new Hakes 42 building. I think it's another Chinese builder. Does anybody know? Yeah.
That's right.
And-
Yesterday, Steve.
Sorry.
They put in the water yesterday.
Oh, did they?
And it floated. So-
Yeah. That's
No,
awesome.
Looks good. Looks good.
And there's GP42s which fit this pretty well, and especially with the existing boat credit. And there's a new Trip 42 coming out. All these boats, all the new boats are basically flush deck. Care 40 with a little bit of tweaking, we think could probably hit it pretty well, or maybe Jason will do a new design. We're not so sure.
What, like slightly tighter lifelines?
Yeah. The TP52s were a prototype for the rule, so that class is fully included. This is confidential, but the TP52 class is looking at HPR now, and there's studies by two of the major design offices to see if HPR could possibly work for the class. So that would be another way forward for the rule to get going worldwide and establish a critical mass of certificates around the world. Of course, the mini maxis fit it really well. There's a new RHKYC 45 building, and I can't really say because I'm under a disclosure confidentiality agreement, but I think it might be a little bit bigger than that. And then there's another RHKYC 60 that just got ordered, and that's going for Matt Allen in Australia. And Matt Allen is on the HPR committee, so he's one of 9 committee members for HPR out of Australia, and he's building that right now. That's commissioned at Premier Composites in Dubai. So how does all this fit together? Pretty well so far, with the ORA being the rule owner. What happened was New York Yacht Club got it going, commissioned the studies, did the groundwork for HPR, and New York Yacht Club did not want to be a rule owner. So we then reached out to some organizations who would like to take HPR over as an owner, and the Offshore Racing Association in America stepped up and said, we want to be the owner. And so they are right now. And then HPR needed an administrator or administrators to process certificates and get the rule going around the world, and it now has administrative relationships with the ORC and U.S. Sailing. And what's kind of cool is that the ORC is now the world central processor for HPR certificates. And this is a development that's in process with ORC's Sailing Services database, but all HPR certificates will be issued by the ORC worldwide. So there won't be any difference between countries. It'll all come from one world central database, the ORC's database, and that'll issue the certificates. As soon as a valid certificate is issued, it's reviewed by the chief measurers and then posted online. So every certificate that gets issued goes online once it's validated. And this is a new relationship that's just been processed and should be operational within a month.
Are they freely
Question
available
mark?
to everyone?
Sorry?
Are they freely available to everyone, or do you have to be a
No.
hold a certificate to be able to see the other certificate?
No, freely, publicly available, once issued. The question mark obviously here is the RORC, and we would very much like the RORC to participate in this effort. And if there's anything that we need to be doing from our side to create compatibility around the world, and we're all ears, let us hear about it in any way, shape, or form. If we could get that third leg of the stool in place, we would have a really solid foundation. This is a HPR certificate. And what you're looking for is this number right here, which is a familiar rating number. It's the TCF, and this happens to be our boat Spooky, and in this case it's shown as 1.013, and it comes from a final rating of, somebody read that, 12.64? Okay, so that's a metric length number of rating, and some of you, not too many, but a few in this room will remember the IOR days when we had rating in terms of feet. Right? The rating was in your IOR 40-footer rated 40-something. Well, this boat happens to be 12.175 meters long, and its rating is expressed in metric length terms. And so what's happened is some of these factors are a little bit more than what the base boat would predict or want. So spinnaker area, for example, you're getting a multiplier of 0.0014. So these things are stepping up the rating. And you rate basically, so your rating gets calculated into a time correction formula, which is applied the same way that your IRC rating would get applied. And we also have a seconds per mile expression for those people who like to know seconds per mile. And I think if you go to the next page, then it talks about events. And so we've just had Quantum Key West. There was actually 9 boats at Quantum Key West, one dropped out. I get back to the HPR Midwinters, which will be a sister championship with the TP52 Worlds in Miami. We do have 4 boats entered and competing in that. Block Island Race Week will be the HPR North Americans. We have a distance race from Marblehead to Halifax, Canada, and that'll be the first HPR distance race. Transpac's, I believe, going to be using it. HPR Nationals will be at San Francisco's Big Boat Series, and then we run a East Coast Regatta in Annapolis in October around Halloween. And what we're trying to do is to get enough certificates to host a ISAF-approved World Championship in 2014. And I'd be happy to take questions, but before we do that, let me show you a couple of quick videos. So, Mike, do you think you can minimize that? And then, I think if you go to this right here, yeah, and play. So I apologize for the video quality, but this is a distance race that Manhasset Bay Fall Series ran as part of their regatta. And it's a 2-weekend regatta, and they, on the Sunday, the first weekend Sunday, they posted a distance race of about 25 miles, which started with a 2-mile beat to windward. Wind conditions were 23 to 27 knots southwest. We got around the windward mark, we put up that spinnaker, which is our 4A, it's a maximum size spinnaker, and we started planing by the entire fleet. We were last to start. We passed every boat that had started ahead of us into about 10 or 15 minutes into the run. You can see how quickly we're going by everybody else. And this was a little bit hairy because we never sailed a boat in that much wind before. So we leave the jib stays up in this condition. That's a number 4 Genoa. And here you can see that the smaller boats were going around a mark there. And we had another 5 miles to go downwind, which was really an exciting run. And just to me, it was the epitome of why we want to sail boats like this and why this rule can actually work, because we never fell off the plane unless we did something wrong. So jibing, of course, you lose it a little bit, but if you jibe it well, you can get right back onto the plane. It's even possible if you do a perfect jibe. Now there's another video on the desktop, Mike, so maybe if you just close or minimize that. And that one is the mark rounding, yeah. So you're probably wondering, well, how do you get that spinnaker down? And double click. And this is how you get it down. a little bit of buffering in this, but basically we're coming into the leeward mark right now, which is, for those of you who know the sound, it's 32A in mid-sound. And the spinnaker has a retriever cord on it, which goes down below onto a drum, which is run by two grinders on the pedestal. The grinders are back here, ready to go on this retriever line. And there they go. They're now winding it in. To windward is much, much safer. All the bowman has to do is to feed it down the hatch a little bit, and the whole sail gets sucked down and down below. And it's a really clean, fast way to do the drop. And there's the bell buoy that we were going around. We'll go on the wind here. And you can kind of see what's exciting about these boats is how much buoyancy they have in the bow. So we're not putting the bow under too badly. I mean, we do occasionally, but we pop back up very quickly. So this is a 10-man crew going upwind and over 20 knots here. And I think at that point I should explain that that spinnaker drop does not always go flawlessly. And in our 6th race at Key West, it was actually on a spinnaker set. And we launched the spinnaker, we're in the lead, and the retriever line fetched up and snagged on something. So the patch in the sail got loaded up, and the patch ripped completely out of the sail. So now there's a big gaping hole in the middle of the spinnaker. And of course the spinnaker exploded. And then the whole crew went down to leeward to try to take it down, and it was in tatters, and it went in the water, and then it wrapped around the keel and the rudder. So I went head to wind to try to stop the boat so that they could get it in, and watched basically the whole class sail by us. So we sent a diver over twice with a knife, and it was a brand new 2A too. It was a little bit discouraging, but so things can definitely go wrong. These boats are challenging to sail, but they're a heck of a lot of fun. So I'd like to open this up to any questions. I do have one more video if anybody wants to see it about the Sailing Out Research Foundation, but I think the point of the evening has been thrown across to you all to see what we're up to and whether it makes sense or what questions you might have.
Benj, I'd be interested to know how many boats you think there are on the planet at the moment, outside of the TP52 world, that could be reconfigured, or like a GP42, obviously I'm thinking of straight off the bat, to race in this HPR thing.
Yeah. Well, we frankly have a projection in 5 years' time to have 750 certificates worldwide. So that's kind of a goal. Look, like I started with, 10 years from now, we want to get this totally going. 5 years from now, if we had 750 certificates, that would be a goal achieved. Next year or this year, there could maybe be 100 boats around that could qualify. Something, maybe more, I don't know. But I know there's about 20 GP42s. There's got to be 50 TP52s. Yeah.
Steve, under this rule, do you think that, say, a GP26 would be able to go out and do the same course as, say, a Kakik or a TP and be competitive under the rule, or would the big boat always tend to be fast?
From what we've looked at on a GP26, they're a little bit narrow. Their beam's a bit narrow for the type form, and they're a little shy on sail area. And but they would get some good credits from the existing boat. And then, so one of the nice things about HPR is we've got a rating formula with a rated length, which, as you saw in my case, was like 12.6 something. But we've also got a time correction factor. So you convert the rated length to the TCF. So there's a two-step process in there. And because of that, we're able to vary either one, the formula or the TCF calculation. And what we've just done is said that the small boats are not getting enough time from the big boats, because we know that from the the TP52s were clobbering the 40s. in the racing that we've done so far in Annapolis and Key West. And by the way, our analysis is always published. So we have a Key West race analysis, which is on the HPR sailing website, which you could look at and see the basis for every rule change that we're putting in. And so the small boats are getting more time now. And right now it's a linear calculation, but it doesn't necessarily need to be linear. It could be that it needs to be some sort of a curve, which we'll find after more results are known. So maybe they should. The idea is that they should be. Yeah.
What is the TP rate? I mean, we saw your boat up there as...
Yeah, so it's 15 something. It's the metric length.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does the time correction factor come out on that?
Well, we should pull up a TP52 certificate and check that. But I think they're... I would want to check that before commenting, but we could definitely check that.
What you've just said about the small boats getting more credit time because you found out in actual realities that they are getting clobbered by the bigger boats.
Yeah.
That sentence is performance handicapping. If you do that, there will be a lot of pressure from people who feel they are disadvantaged. Everybody feels they're disadvantaged. At some point, where are you going to say, look, this is a measurement rule. We are not going to go back to performance handicapping.
Right. Well, first of all, there are no subjective factors. So there's no hidden dial. There's no guy behind the black curtain shifting things around. Everything that we do is published, and there's a mathematical formula with the measurements to back it up. What you say is important, that we want rule stability, and we need to be at a point where we're not changing anything. And we're very, very close. In fact, I think that the new boat formula is solid. So after a few more races, I think we could basically declare that this is final.
Is there any attempt to entice present boat owners from other or non-high performance rule boats to come over to dip their toes in, see what it's like?
Well, it's free, so anybody who wants to can download the spreadsheet, put in their numbers, and calculate on a hypothetical or trial basis how they would be doing. If you want to get to the point of having a certificate, you could get a valid certificate. I believe your boat would qualify. Are you using water ballast?
No.
Okay, so there's no water ballast and there's no canted keel. So other than that, I think you could go ahead and get an HPR certificate for your boat, valid if you wanted to, and then start looking at your performance. One of the interesting things is that yachtscoring.com, which is a website we use a lot in the States to score races, it has a performance analysis and history on it. So you can go back and look at certain races and see your times and how you're doing. Why don't we just put on that surf video just to wrap this up? I think you'll see it on the desktop. This one. So surf is the funding mechanism for HPR. Sorry, we'll have to rely on the computers.
Well, the inspiration for
volume all the way up.
surfing in about 2005, U.S. Sailing decided to be an administrator of rules and not an owner of rules. And surf was formed at the same time to provide technical and scientific support.
The objective of surf from the beginning has been to have a mechanism to continuously improve the technology and science that underpins mankind's ability to predict the performance of sailboats. And the first project we did there for the surf was to investigate what happens to an upwind configuration of sails, 2+ main, when you heel the boat over. And within minutes of getting the first cycle of data onto a computer where we could look at the analysis, not only validated our suspicions, but put some numbers to it so that we could then take the VPP and remove a bias that had actually been very destructive to the fleets of boats that optimized to rule. by having better science behind the prediction of the performance of sailboats. One is you can improve handicap rules, whether they be empirical formula or VPP based. Another benefit is the navigation, and I've had a huge personal return on that. In navigation, if you have better sets of polars, the navigator can do a more effective job routing boats for the weather and the sea state situation. The third benefit is really all design efforts.
If you look at the evolution of boats, the boats are just faster, they're better, they're stronger, they're just way better boats. It really has improved sailing and it's improved the competition enormously.
What I call the top level of Grand Prix type sailing has pursued boats that can plane. These kinds of forms are outside the database of anything that's publicly available. In the very beginning, the objective of SURF was to make those improvements publicly available to benefit the entire sport.
The Sailing Yacht Research Foundation's first public event today is a lead-in to a worldwide growing of SURFs supporting the science of sailing.
And I think the most significant step that we've made is creating this advisory council. It's got approximately 18 members, and they represent an international distribution of designers, people that work in research facilities like tow tanks or wind tunnels, people that work with handicaps. We want to have this group advise us on what they think the issues are and how we can design and execute programs to address those issues.
SURF will definitely bring more organized way of dealing with the problems, because very many of these problems are dealt with by different organizations all over the world, and there's a fair amount of duplication. So I think if we can bring all these forces together, it will be extremely useful.
Today's event was an idea to bring together a broad base of supporters for the Sailing Yacht Research Foundation and have some talks by Stan Honey, Peter Eisler, Jim Teeters, and myself.
The situation basically is that, well, how do you get the science? How do you do the tank testing and the flow dynamics? And where do you get the computer time? Well, you need money. You need money to do the science, and this is how we get the money to do it.
Coming to this luncheon today is a benefit to anybody who wants to race at the Grand Prix level, so that as a unified group, we can advance great sailboat racing. We've all seen boats that have tipped over, lost keels, and things like that. And one of the factors that we will learn more about is how we can make them safer.
HPR was a concept back from 2010, which has grown into an active rating rule. It's a fair rating system for high-performance planing boats. There are HPR boats building all over the world at this point, and it seems to be gaining momentum on every turn. All countries will be able to use a central processing facility organized through the ORC to issue certificates. The first time ever that certificates have been generated worldwide by one authority. So it's a really exciting time.
A more fair, more fun platform sport is going to attract new people. So technology helps, but the exciting thing for me is beyond all that which we can imagine when we think, what does better science bring? It's all the unknowns, all the intangibles that are only going to come with time. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting things about surf is the future that we still can't quite picture. It's just around the corner.
That video is available online as well at Sail Yacht Research. Any other questions for tonight? Jamie, how are we doing on time?
Well, no problem at all, Benj.
No materials restrictions on fins or stuff, so you can carbon fins and things. Try and get a little simple grab.
Well, it's got to be ORC compliant, Cat 1 or Cat 2. And I think that the carbon fins are fine because the Mechanic 38 has it. Right? Mechanic 38's got a carbon fin. It would probably lower the VCG a little bit, so you have to look at your VCG penalty. But yeah, and GL approval, plan approval. You got to have plan approval.
By who?
One of the ISAF approved structural companies. So GL's the main one for TP52s, and that's who we use, but there's a list on the ISAF website of the structural companies that you can get approval from.
Benj, in practical terms, right? I mean, you know our racing circuit in Asia.
Yeah.
Where do you see an HPR event happening in Asia?
That's going to be a tricky one. I knew this question was coming, and I think what you're doing here is great because you've got really good racing with IRC, and maybe what you want to do is just try some dual scoring with some HPR, where anybody who wants to submit an HPR certificate and get dual scored would be allowed to do that, and then as people start building new boats and we get critical mass around the world and hopefully a world championship, then maybe there could be some HPR events. But we're struggling with the same thing in America, where like, how do we get the critical mass? But we had to start somewhere, and for fast, fun, racing, planing boats, there was nothing.
Jamie, I don't think you have to have a HPR event. You could have an HPR class in a standard event.
Yes.
As a tryout.
Yes.
How about course configurations for these boats?
Right. That's a super critical one, and we found that out at Key West. If you look at the Key West analysis, what they did is they ran 2 races every day. We had 5 days of racing, 2 races a day, 10 races. Every morning race, so all the odd number races were windward leeward 50-50, and all the even number races were in the afternoon. It was a northeasterly wind, so we would beat up towards the island for the final beat. So it was a 60-40, 3 windward legs, 2 leeward legs, and the KARE 40 definitely did better in the races that finished to windward. So I believe that the HPR formulation is basically a 50-50 formulation, but it's got to apply as a single number to all courses and distance racing and everything else. So I think you need a mix of courses. But the analysis was done on 50-50, and 10 to 12 knots would be the target wind speed.
Have you run it on any offshore races or not?
Well,
you talk about sort of dual scoring and things like that. Have you run any?
I don't think we have yet, but we could, because we did the Key West race, and we had several HPR boats in it that had certificates, so we could rerun that. But there haven't been yet. Marblehead Halifax will be the first one with an HPR trophy.
Wasn't there some pineapple thing recently?
Yeah, but there wasn't scored HPR.
Really?
It was the race to Jamaica.
It's just we've seen a lot of boats that were familiar from the HPR class in Key West.
Yes.
Just a suggestion, as we're talking about all these wind strength, keeping it simple from an owner's point of view, and not try to repeat the mistakes of the IMS, which attempted to cater to everybody in every condition, and come up with a fair result. That was just too complicated. So basically what I've heard tonight is that this is a thrust into a lightweight boat.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Planing boat.
Huh?
It's a planing
boat.
boat.
A lightweight boat is will tend to plane much easier when you're 1 to 2 tons heavy, lighter than your equivalent mate.
Yeah.
And you don't get okay, I use the word, you don't get punished for being what the rule maker of any rule deem it to be too light. That if you keep that, the rest of it will just about fall into place. The wider transom, the flatter runoff, the fuller bow to balance it, and etc.
Yeah.
If you just say we're not going to hit you because you're 2 tons lighter, that's it. The rest of it will come. Well, but keeping it simple is probably the most important part.
I agree with you. There's a single number, so it doesn't matter the wind speed or the course configuration. Your rating is your rating, and that is going to apply for every race. The whole shape is up to you. You have an overall length, and you have a draft and a beam, but what you put in there, that's up to you. You go and decide whatever you want.
Can you make changes before every single race and just remeasure it?
Yeah, before every regatta, and you would have to comply with the sailing instructions to have your valid certificate with the organizing authority per the notice of race or sailing instructions in time.
In theory, you can have 3 different keels and change.
You could do that. Now we're thinking about horses for courses, and you know what extremes people might go to optimize for San Francisco versus Long Island Sound. So one way around that is to have a season championship and to say only boats that have essentially the same configuration for the season are eligible for the season-long championship. Would be one possibility. Yes, you could have new sails with small changes, but a keel with a big change on a bulb weight, that would probably throw you out of a season championship if we got to that point. We're probably years away from being at that.
And it's open to as many sails as you want as well.
Yeah. So sails are open and crew is controlled per the maximum crew weight. One thing that's been going on is that people are taking crew off on tenders between races at regattas, and it's really discouraging for the crew if you're the guys getting taken off the boat, and that's not what we're about. We're trying to create more people sailing, not less. So at Key West, we put in a rule that you had to sail with the same crew for every race. Decide what crew weight you want. The same people got to be on board every race. If you have a medical emergency or a work emergency, you could petition to change your crew, but you would have to bring somebody else in. And then we said you're allowed to have one extra person, totally optional for any race that you wanted, but it had to be a media person who was willing to share his video and photographs, or over 70. And we would probably put it in that it could also be under 14 as the last person.
A range of weight, say 4% that you may come under, to make it flexible.
Yeah, the way it works right now is for example, my boat 40 foot would have a maximum crew weight of 763 kilos, and
10 people.
10 people, 763. It's hard to get to. Yeah, so you probably decision sailed with 8 to get to that. But what happened at Key West was that the FAR 400 said, "Oh, we need 800 and some kilos," and so we extended the weight range up higher and said you could declare any weight that you want, and we'll rate you accordingly. And it's only like half a second a mile to have a little bit heavier crew if that's what you want to do. But it gets to the point of it's actually slowing the boat down, because downwind, more weight obviously is slow. But yeah, there's a crew weight range that you can declare.
Just like in Thailand, the King's Cup.
Yeah.
After a while, they did away with the numbers all the way. It didn't outrageously throughout the competition,
yeah.
But it made a lot easier for people, logistics, and it just more people could come and more people could leave.
Okay. Benj, it seems to me almost an inherent contradiction that you have a Grand Prix high performance only rule, but one of your goals is to increase the number of people that are sailing. Do you find that you're getting a lot of interest from people who are new to sailing? Or are you just finding people that may have got disillusioned because of the fact you had to have a shed to win, unless it was over 50?
The problem we were trying to solve for was nobody was building boats. So few people were building boats. And now suddenly we've got a lot of boats building. So it may be that these are owners who are frustrated with the existing structure and said, I want something that I know what my boat's going to rate before I build it.
Was that an American problem?
Yeah. absolutely.
Because it wasn't a European problem.
Okay.
So
It was definitely an American problem.
So what were people sailing in America?
They were just sailing old boats and saying, I don't want to build a new boat because I don't know what it's going to rate. I don't feel like I've got clarity on where the sport is headed. And I frankly took quite a bit of criticism for creating another alternative and saying, why are you doing this? And my vision, which is shared by a lot of people, is that this is advancing the sport. And we would like to open a dialogue worldwide of how we advance the sport of sailing. And if this isn't the right approach, then tell us what is. And if there's something we can do better, then let's do it. And you know, let's not make this adversarial. Let's make it complementary.
Well, the boats are cool. There's no question about that. It's just I'm trying to figure out how it's ever going to get an adequate critical mass without just being, a purely for a big regatta. Like the places we sail or somewhere else. There's not a lot of boats in any given club.
Sure. Well, I think you just start slowly out here if you want to experiment with it and get some trial certificates going and do some trial scoring the way we've been doing in the States and see what people think about it. And then perhaps when you go to build your new boat, you'll say, well, maybe I shouldn't build a 5,000 kilogram boat. Maybe I should build a 4,500 kilogram boat because it'll be more competitive HPR. It'll be faster. My boat owes your boat 6.5% of time. We're planing in 13 or 14 knots, and your boat's going to beat mine from probably under IRC. You'll beat me most races from 9 to 14 knots. When you're sailing along and you're fully powered up, you're sailing along, everything's good, you're going to win that race. When we start planing and we finish downwind, you're going to have a real hard time. And in light air, we're very fast. So, it's like, what boat do you want to sail?
Light air, is that competitive in IRC, do you think?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, actually, at Key West, there was nothing there was only a point in it or nothing in it. Right?
We were 1 point behind Catapult on the IRC scoring, and all races counted, and we had that Spinnaker debacle where we had score to last. I think everybody needs a drink.
Right, well, thanks a million again, Ben.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.